Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players of the gigging variety. I'm your host David Holloway, and once again it's great to be here with you. This episode we have yet another amazing keyboard player, although that's only one aspect of this person's work with sound. Lisa Bella Donna's website has a great bio that encapsulates her perfectly, and I'm going to read it out word for word. Lisa Bella Donna is a multi-instrumentalist, composer, modular synthesist and clinician. She has many years as a session musician, as well as developing extensive techniques with musique concrète, modular synthesis, analog and digital recording techniques, drumming and percussion, microtonal music, orchestration and film composition. She has also toured all throughout the USA, Japan and Europe as a clinician, drummer and keyboardist. As you'll hear, Lisa and I try and cover a bit of that ground that's mentioned in her bio, and I hope you enjoy the insight she has. Hi, Lisa. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, David. How are you?
Good. I know you've had a busy week, so I thought I might just start off actually your most recent release, which was itself a re-release of your 94 work, Snowy Dreamscapes. Can you tell us a little bit about why you've come back to that and your recollections of the original recording?
Yes, sir. I'd love to talk about that. Snowy Dreamscapes was a record that I did back in between 93 and 94. And that was really only a few years after I had really gotten deeply into synthesis and modular synthesis and basically just orchestrating with them, and this is, at the end of the 80s going into the 90s. And I sort of just, when I discovered the ARP 2600 specifically, I just sort of, rearranged my life to sort of devote myself to learning it and to creating the music that I wanted to hear. And at the time, I didn't hear a lot of recordings or music that was going on that really embraced that sound and that process. And so I lived in this little shack, basically, as what we call over here a shotgun shack. It literally was that. And but it was warm, and it was filled with ARPs and a Tascam 388 tape machine and a couple of 2-track reel-to-reels, an Otari and I think a TIAC. What is it? The 3340.
Oh, yep.
And so basically with that, I just, it was really that was really what I felt was like my first really good record. And I released it, on cassette at the time, but, no one really had any reference for that kind of music. There wasn't the internet. There wasn't a lot of people really digging into the 70s, which I was very passionate about. And it's also where I came up from. So, long story short, because I could talk about that record for a long time. Fast forward 30, 35 years, I had befriended Dina Pearlman, who is the daughter of Alan R. Pearlman. Mm-hmm. And we've been friends for a year now, and we have really had a great rapport. And I have been helping as much as I can with her foundation, for the Alan R. Pearlman Foundation, that celebrates her father's life and work and is a great source of archive for ARP synthesizers. And last winter, I had the luxury of time to get out all the master tapes from that session. And because it was one of the few records that I had done that was all ARP, no other instruments. I did have I had a Prophet 5 and a Moog and other stuff at the time too, but I really there was something about combining these ARPs that really it had a sound. And I hope that record, I did my best. It's an old analog recording, so I still was learning, and some of the tracks were a little noisy and I had to try to clean them up. but some of the tracks turned out really, really great. And I wanted to offer it to the foundation as just a way to help support it. And for anyone that is passionate or interested in learning about ARP synthesizers and their history, I urge you to, go to the Alan R. Pearlman website and the foundation, and please donate to it. Check it out. Dina is an amazing woman, and I think it's a great opportunity. It's really a thrill, because I never thought in a million years that I would, the whole time, of making this music, really the ARP 2600 has been the mainstay in my studio since, 1992. So, to be able to meet her and to hear about her father and just their life, and, on so many occasions, and it's a great privilege, and, very much an honor to offer this work for them. And I hope that it generates more interest and education of the magic of ARP synthesizers.
Exactly, and we'll definitely have a link in the show notes to your Bandcamp page where that album's available, as you said, with the proceeds going to the Pearlman Foundation. I'm just interested, as a sideline, have you had a play with the re-release of the ARP?
Oh, the Korg 2600? Yeah. I have. I did get to play it in Los Angeles, and, I'm glad that they did it. I think that they did a great job in terms of the authenticity of the look and the feel of it. And it's really awesome that they did it that way. I will say that I wish that they took a little bit more time to really dial in the sound.
Yeah.
I don't think the sound is as ARP as it could be. I have, a couple of different kinds of ARP clones also. And, especially the Antonus 2600, I feel, is the closest to really capturing the sort of not just the sound, but there's a way that ARPs and many different synthesizers, there's a slew of attenuation. There's an XY between certain things with the envelope generation, and just how hard the filter will hit the amps, and all that sort of thing. And Tony Gutierrez has really dialed that in. He's someone who owns an original. He really knows how to get that dialed in. I think Korg got really close, and I'm disappointed that they only did so many.
Yes, I was about to say that, because I would have seriously considered it under the same guise, but yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, unfortunately, no hope.
Yeah, it was kind of, that was very disappointing. So I give it a C.
Yeah, that's right. Based on availability alone, I agree.
Yeah, sorry, but that was kind of like, why do all that hype if there's only going to be that many of them?
That's right.
It's a no-brainer that everybody wants one, so they're going to sell them.
Yeah, exactly. And let's go back a little bit further now, and this is a question we ask all our guests. So what are your recollections of how you first developed your interest in sound and manipulating it and music and so on?
Well, with manipulating with sound, my interest in music started at age 3, and very much, I was very much obsessed with music and learning everything about music that I could. But being able to actually get stuff in my hands and record and manipulate sound probably was about the time I was my daughter's age, and she's 8.
Okay.
And I had like a realistic 8-track cartridge.
Oh, yep.
Tape deck, and then I, with a stepfather, he and I built a Heath Kit cassette deck.
Wow.
Do you remember the Heath Kits by chance, or am I really just like a fossil over here?
No. I'm understanding the DIY kits. Yeah, so that's amazing. I didn't realize they used to do cassette ones, but that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a nice tabletop, like a face-up tabletop cassette deck. Man, it sounded great. And using those two things together, I would bounce and create recordings. And then even at an early age, I figured out how to use the 8-track deck as a sort of chord changer. And
Wow.
a way to develop contrast and then kind of play along with that. And you know, I never really had a synthesizer or anything of that nature, or even an organ. Up until my mom's sister had a Wurlitzer organ, and that was really where I first, was amazed at electronic sound. But I really never had an organ in my hands until my very early teens.
Yes.
So, but yeah, about 8 or 9.
And over those early years, and this is, I'm totally lifting this from another interview you've done, but I believe you spent a lot of time exploring genres and learning about composers. So can you tell us a little bit about, at some stage, your weekly trips to the library for records?
Absolutely. Yeah, that was one of the most important times of my development. I would say about age 11, 12. I moved to this part of town where it was basically centered. The library was kind of in the center. I moved to different places around in that town, but I always could get to that library. And it was amazing. There were so many books that I would read about composers, classical composers, 20th century composers, which led me to physics of sound. And there was a really pretty lush record collection there. And there was a record player in the library, so you could have headphones. And so if I couldn't have an instrument in my hands, I would sit with a piece of paper and listen to the headphones and try to figure out something in the music. But if I had the time to have an instrument in my hands and the record player next to me, my own, then I would learn a piece of music one day a week in some way. Maybe not the whole thing, but I would learn something from a different kind of music. I would go in there and close my eyes and pick out a different record from a different genre for each day of the week. And I would also write. I was very I love to write notebooks full of notes about these things too. So I would have these references that I could go back to, and what were certain things that made their music special, and just kind of, I've always been a sort of catalogist. Is that a word?
It is now.
Someone that likes to catalog stuff, and I've always been into that, even since I was a kid.
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, and it's probably because you dealt with so many records. Do you find it hard to make any stand out? But were there some iconic ones that, as you were doing that really had an impact on you more than others, or it was just more immersing yourself in everything that was available?
Oh, absolutely. Sure, I was definitely immersed in a lot of stuff, but I would say one of the couple of the real biggest impressions on me were a couple of the records. The library got so sick of me checking them out, they gave them to me. They're like, just keep this thing, So one was Walter Kraft doing a repertoire of Dietrich Buxtehude, which is an early Baroque composer and organist. And he is actually the, Bach's teacher. And his work still remains a huge inspiration to me, and I still return to it and marvel at its amazingness of dynamics and passion and depth and just tonal range. And it's amazing, and it's kind of has an edge to it that I like, that I also feel kind of carries on in my own work. I think it's very easy for synthesizer music to get kind of buffed to a sheen all the time. And Buxtehude's work has this edge that's really awesome. Andres Segovia, there was a 5 LP Time Life box set thing with a booklet and everything. And oh man, that record blew me away. And I actually spent a couple of summers learning some of that music. One in particular was Bach's Chaconne in D minor violin partitura.
Wow.
And I spent a whole summer learning that bad boy. And what an amazing experience. And to hear about Segovia's life and his dedication to music. Another would be Wendy Carlos's Sonic Seasoning. And that's where everything started to shift into a whole other, just the awareness of possibilities. I almost looked at it like the forest of music. And that's kind of really how I feel about my own electronic music now. It's like a forest of music. You have every possibility, and that's what really made me very interested in synthesizers, more than just using a synthesizer as a melodic device. Of course I love that too, but listening to Wendy's music and realizing, okay, this isn't a field recording. This is a synthesizer making this a sonic dimension happening.
You had a great library, Lisa, because I would have killed, and I did a little bit of record borrowing. I'm a handful of years older than you. I would have killed for a Wendy Carlos record in my library.
Well, I had a little bit of a head start. I had a stepfather who had an amazing, he wasn't a musician. He was a tradesman. He was worked in one of our power plants in the town I grew up, and he had this great musical attitude and turned me on to everything. I already thought I knew it all at age 8 and 9. I came to the table. I grew up loving the heavy rock and roll stuff. I loved Black Sabbath and Uriah Heep and Aerosmith and all that sort of behavior. But when my mom and Dana was his name, married, he turned me on to so much great stuff. Ralph Towner, Bob Dylan, Miles Davis, May Blitz, T2, Shostakovich, Chopin. I mean, it just goes on and on.
Yeah.
The band. I mean, the whole XTC were just coming out.
Yeah.
And he turned me on to that kind of stuff. Adam and the Ants. Gosh, really awesome things. Wendy Carlos, of course, and Tomita. Yeah, he was very open.
He was
very open. There really wasn't a lot of television going on in the house,
which is a good thing. Yeah. And
it's like you either were going to do a manual project. He taught me calligraphy and gardening and things like that, and so it was more of that sort of lifestyle for really awesome 4 years that they were married.
And it's probably that diversity of music. I know, again, lifting from another interview, that you're quoted as saying, "I'd like to move around with styles which has cost me a career." Do you still feel that way, that it's cost you a career, or it's just a different career to what you might have thought it may have eventuated?
Well, no, I finally picked a lane.
Yeah, so because that was going to be my next question about the lanes. Yeah, okay, so go with that.
Yeah, I just decided to. I really just kind of decided to again change my life, and I really don't do a lot of jazz gigs anymore. I got out of all the bands that I was in, and I'm really just it's like a full circle for me. I've really wanted to do something more with electronic music when I started, in the 90s, and it was always there, and I always did it. It was always always took deep stabs at it, and always continued to do it. But all the way around, I wanted to put myself in situations that taught me more than just the music itself, but people and musical demographics and all of that sort of thing, not just being somebody cutting up spools of tape and programming synthesizers. I mean, that's awesome, but it's also a very singular way of working.
Yes.
And now I have all these years of experience of being on the road and traveling and touring internationally and playing so many different kinds of music. Most people wouldn't even really believe me,
no.
Because I've just been willing to roll up the sleeves and be like, okay, well, what's this like? I like a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I want to try this. I want to see if there's a part of my soul that has something to contribute and something to learn as well. But now I've picked a lane, and I've pretty much dedicated what I'm doing and my studio and everything to back to back to the core, which is, synthesizers. I don't have a drum kit in my studio anymore. Right. I mean, I do still practice guitar just to keep from completely losing it. And I continue to work on fingerstyle music that will get incorporated into my records, because I'm, that's a deep passion of mine is fingerstyle guitar.
Right.
But other than that, I've just decided, you know what, I'm going to stick with this and create some momentum with this.
Great. And before we get on to some performance-related stuff, I'm just interested in how you tend to approach composition now. So, I mean, we've talked briefly about Snowy Dreamscapes, where you intentionally limited yourself to the ARP 2600. How do you tend to approach a new piece now? And do you tend to like that, limiting yourself to particular pieces of gear as a start?
Sometimes, yes. And sometimes I build little stations. I have my main studio that looks out to really beautiful wilderness. And I also have a couple of little small stations there's a den sort of attached to my dining room. And there's a little 4-channel reel-to-reel and a 2-channel in there. And sometimes I'll just throw a synth up in there and just, see if I can still do it old school. And sometimes that brings an entirely different part of my muse. But for the most part, I work in here where I'm sitting, and it just kind of starts with something. Either I typically will either compose away from the studio, on paper, with my phone until I catalog enough stuff that I can go in here and put it together. But if I'm coming in here and composing with instruments from the ground up, it's typically I just sort of throw together, I just run some channels of some things that would feel good today. These instruments feel good together today. Let's do these. And start going for it. Just patch up some stuff that feels good, take a walk outside, come back and listen again, and just continue to refine it until it becomes something that I can either perform with live, which is kind of how a lot of my records are made, quite honestly, as opposed to things like Snowy Dreamscapes, where there's tons of editing and there's a lot of performance too, but there's a lot of, I was very eager to develop technique with tape editing and tape composition. But here I do less of that. I do some, but now it's more like I have many different kinds of ways to record. I have 16 tracks of analog, 8 tracks of analog, 3 sets of 4 channels, and of course the computer. It just depends on my mode, where I'm at and what I want to hear, and whether or not I am that worried about having clock after the fact. If I'm ready to just go for it and create something in the moment, then I typically go with analog tape. If I feel that I want to be able to have, if I'm just, it's usually something I can see in the distance, then I'll use the computer, use clock, and start that way. And typically, even with my analog recordings, they wind up in the computer to get, just cleaned up a little bit and made to be professionally presented to listeners.
And I think you've probably answered the next question I was going to ask, at least partly, and that was, and it's a question I've always had doing some ambient stuff myself, is how do you keep an eye on the future as far as performance if you are recording something more traditionally? And what I mean by that is, do you factor in when you're writing, and it sounds like you don't, in that a lot of your stuff is capturing what you're doing live anyway, how do you factor in how replicable it will be live when you're actually making the music that you do?
It depends. I don't typically go out and perform synthesizer tunes. Sometimes I do. I have a couple of tunes that are easy to whip up and recall. I have a piece called Conclusions, and that winds up in live sets sometimes. And there's others that have a certain riff or a certain, hook. But typically I just, depending on how much equipment I have, I can pretty much pull it off. I do a lot of traveling with doing workshops and clinics, master classes. Typically those are paired up with doing a concert either later that evening or the next night.
Yeah.
And typically I try to get as much know what I'm arriving when I show up. Sometimes I can travel with instruments and sometimes I can't. So when I can't, I try to think about, okay, well, this is what I'm going to have. What am I going to do with it? And I just do what I can, and make sure there's still that musical connection. Even if I've just got a mini Moog and a stereo delay, that'll be fine.
And I would have thought that that's an advantage for your audiences to some extent, in that depending on where they are and what's happening at the time, they're going to get a very different show every time.
Well, that's the jazz. No, I shouldn't have said that. Now I'm already disqualified. But that is part of the jazz background, and with my muse, is I've had many years of playing different kinds of jazz music, and you have to be intuitive. You have to listen as much as you do play. And I like to do that. I think it's important to put yourself on the spot and put yourself in a vulnerable situation with the audience.
That's right.
And I feel that that's part of where my best stuff comes from, as opposed to going out and be like, okay, I'm going to play this song for you. Now, granted, if I was playing jazz fusion or rock or something like that, I have hundreds of songs and charts and jazz tunes and fusion pieces, concertos, basically, of, sonata form jazz fusion pieces. But, the reason that those aren't on record is because, the budget just isn't there.
That's right.
I don't. And I had to pick and choose. I had so many great live situations that I, wished during those times the technology was there to capture them properly. But at the time, that the music was the most important thing.
That's right.
But to answer your question, I just, I roll with it.
Yeah.
Whatever's available, I'll use it. Or if I can really travel with gear, I'll typically bring quite a collection of instruments.
And I do want to talk about that too, but I just want to say as an aside, I'm claiming now that you've played live on the podcast with that one sound you just accidentally bumped or hit or whatever happened then.
Yeah.
I'm counting that as a live performance.
Yeah, I was talking with my hands and just hit the mini Moog.
That's great.
In front of me.
No, that was brilliant.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, nothing to be sorry about. That's great. So with your gear, and I understand that what you've just said as far as it does vary, but for the average performance, if there's such thing, what would you tend to bring and how do you have it configured for a live show?
I would say that I definitely like to have some sort of Moog or two. Especially now, I would say at least a grandmother or a matriarch.
Yep.
And then I have a 2600 clone that I have a anvil case for, and I travel with that. And those two things together can work magic.
Yeah.
I have this collection of mothers that I have been slowly but surely putting together, these Moog mother modulars. And hopefully this year I will have these things in their own case, and it'll be easier to travel by playing with them. But right now I just have 3 tiers of them, and I travel with those. And those are amazing. Those allow me to do even almost songs and whole different movements within a set. Depending on how I choose to use them. Sometimes I'll wire them all up and really make them a powerful thing for one performance. But I would say at least a couple of Moogs. And that's about it.
Yeah.
I would say sometimes I travel with the Novation Peak.
Oh, yep.
It's an amazing contrast to the Moogs. I don't take my Selena string ensembles out anymore, but I do have a couple of things like that. I have a sequential prelude.
Oh, yep.
And that's nice for live with a little bit of EQ and stuff. What else would I take out? A Mellotron, a digital Mellotron. So you would typically see me with some of that stuff. Yeah, and then hopefully that is accentuated with whatever the venue has or the university has. You know, sometimes there are grand pianos there. I'll incorporate that, or a Fender Rhodes, you know.
I was going to say, I imagine you come across some amazing gear when the unexpected. Is there one that stands out for you as an unexpected piece of gear that you've utilised that's been a special pleasure for the night?
Yes, of course. Oh my! I would have to say ARP 2500.
Right.
Is a thrill to. I mean, it's a whole other experience. The Oberheim 2 voice with sequencer is just phenomenal. I have to have one of those before I part ways with the world. It was so amazing to use that in performance with my existing gear. It was the perfect contrast. I mean, I've played so many different instruments. A Korg PS-3100 is amazing.
Okay.
And that's an amazing opportunity. A whole other set of rules with the 3100 and 3300. Polyfusion are really amazing synthesizers. Surge instruments are very unique.
Wow.
I mean, you name it. I've probably played it.
Yeah, I can't, and I suppose because you are doing a sort of varied venues too, that you are going to see these things come out of the woodwork in here and there, and that must be great to be able to work that in where you can.
It is, and it's a learning experience. Roland System 7100.
Oh yeah,
that was a really great experience. What a great system that is. I mean, and for a system that large, it is very patch friendly. It's a fixed system, so you can, it's semi-modular, if you will. So you can go in there and get started without having to have patch cables, and then, find your way through. So, yeah. And they all sound unique. That's one of the things I love about classic, authentic synthesizers, and not just vintage, but classic, authentic synthesizers. There's the GRP synthesizers, I feel, are amazing sounding instruments, and the way that they invite you with their signal path, I think, is very inspiring. I don't own one of those, but I think those are very special synthesizers. No. The Moog One is it is an amazing synthesizer, and I am amazed that I didn't get hip to it sooner. Because I was like trying to not get into the menu thing,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's not a bad thing necessarily, but and is there anything sort of? I'm guessing you were at NAMM this year, and I was this year. Is there anything that jumped out at you from NAMM or other recent news that you go, look, I'd really love to get my hands on that?
To be honest, I wasn't at NAMM a lot.
Okay.
I was working at a studio called Hear No Evil for 3 days of the 4 of NAMM.
Right.
So I really just kind of zoomed in on Sunday and came in and did some videos for Moog Music.
Yep.
And visited the foundations, visited my girls, Michelle Moog and Dina Pearlman. Played the 2600 and then left.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice. I've done NAMM for the last 10 years at least straight. And, I've done the front lines
Yeah, it's hard.
and have, so there's a lot of instruments out there that I think are awesome. Let me think what is something that I really like right now. Because I know the Moog one is not new, but it's my personal favorite modern synthesizer. I think the Novation Summit is amazing. Goodness gracious, it's amazing. The 2600 was nice, but yeah, right now I don't have a lot of things that are making me freak out. I'm not interested so much to go back and to get into wavetable synthesis or make it sound like a Korg M1 or something. Yeah. It's cool.
Yeah.
I already did that though. I'm one of those people where I already did that, and the analog stuff is what stayed.
That's right.
I used to have a crazy rig of TX-816.
Oh yeah.
D50, Korg T3, which was the best of that line.
Yeah.
The Korg Prophecy, the Yamaha VL1.
So lots of menus. Yeah.
Oh man, it was a nightmare. Oberheim Matrix 1000s and Sonic Mirages and all that. I don't ever want to have to deal with that again.
I always quite often wonder, with all those iconic ones of the late 80s into the mid 90s, what it would have been like had there been the level of computer interoperability that there is now. So whether it's main stage gig performer, one of those, just rather than the menu diving, what could have been done. But yeah.
Oh yeah, I don't mind to having to do a menu dive. I mean, I definitely went through a long period where I'm done.
Yeah.
And the Moog one, well, that's not true. The Novation Peak was the first that impressed me enough that I was like, okay, I'm willing to get into this.
Yeah.
And the Moog one was the other one. And it's so easy to navigate on it that it just makes sense. But I still love a D50, and I still love a Korg T3. They sound great. I don't necessarily want to use them in my music at this point, but I think that they're great instruments.
Absolutely. And on the playing side, Lisa, just again, a common question we ask is any particularly technically challenging moments, whether that's technically from a playing viewpoint or from a gear viewpoint that you've had when you've performed live that other keyboard players might relate to? So whether that's a glitch or a problem or whatever it is.
Every night. All the time. I would say, because I'm one of those crazy people that I don't show up and have everything pre-sequenced and patched, and I have nothing against the Eurorack world. I think it's awesome. I think there's so many possibilities, but I don't show up to my gigs with everything patched up, ready to go.
Yeah.
I patch per room. I go to a room or I go to a sound check and I try to get a feel for where I'm going to be making music. And that has everything to do with how I decide to patch my synthesizers. And, or, things that do have memory, I might go in and make another bank just for the night of variations of the sounds that I have considered on using. I have problems all the time.
Yeah.
Things like simple stuff that just really makes you angry. And I really try to play for space, and really leave open space. And then I also love to shred. I love to play keyboards and really get into playing some legato lines.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll get done with doing something and your wrist will come up and bump the modulation wheel. And, or you'll forget to turn the resonance all the way down, all those simple things. But typically I try to just go and, just flow with, be in the flow of it.
Yeah, no, that's great. And speaking of players as well, are there other players out there or composers that are catching your attention, particularly now? I mean, we've talked about inspirations, but are there some other people out there that you absolutely love their work at the moment, or just not time to really immerse yourself as like the old days?
I do listen. A lot. Kaitlyn Smith is really amazing, and I love that she has a sort of duality to her style. I feel that she is very unique on record, and then she has an entirely different game when she plays live.
Okay.
Yeah, she just has this whole other spectrum to her music. I think it's really awesome. She's somebody that I really like. But I also don't just listen to electronic musicians.
No.
When I'm a listener, I actually like to listen to many other different kinds of music. I have like anybody else, I have a varied but particular taste.
Yeah.
I listen to one of the newest records that I really love, that I thought was brilliant, was an album called Blood Incantation.
Okay.
Which is a sort of psychedelic progressive death metal band.
Right.
And what I love about it is it sounds live. I mean, it sounds just like they're running the tunes.
Yeah, okay.
It's not one of those. There's a myriad of bands of that style that go in and they touch everything up and sit down while they're playing, and this is a sort of music that's aggressive.
Yeah.
It's visceral, but it's also spacey and very artistically done. This one of the songs is like 18 and a half minutes.
Yeah.
So, that's a great test of keeping a listener or not. And
Absolutely.
That's something that really knocked me out. I've been hanging out with Maxwell Ravitz, aka Patricia.
Okay.
I think he's really a creative musician, and he comes up with great sounds, and I love his attitude of, he basically mixes on the spot, mixes live. He's not a heavy multi-track person, and he's got the guts to go in there and go, yeah, we're going to do this and we're going to do it now. And I like that. I think that's a huge, that's a huge step for a lot of musicians. A lot of people want to play things safe.
Yeah.
So I like risk. I like where there's some risk involved. I like a lot of, let's see here, modern music that I love. I love Brooke Annibale. Her album is amazing. Hold On to the Light. She's a singer-songwriter, and it's amazing. Like, it's just a lot of great songs and different kinds of songwriting per track, production per track. Madeline Cunningham is a young female musician I love, and she's brilliant. She has sort of, between her chordal development and her vocals, she has a sort of, like a Joni Mitchell, but of now. She has a whole other sort of electric, she's more electric, and it's very, very elastic music. Very well done. But I'd say Power Trip is a band that I love. And they're more of like Cro-Mags meets, Bay Area thrash.
Right. Yep.
So I love that. I love Portal out of Australia.
Yeah,
I think they're absolutely brilliant. And so yeah, I listen to all sorts of stuff.
Before we end, I'll give you a one question advance warning. We usually do desert island discs, so I ask people to name 5 discs that they couldn't do without. But so to give you a chance to think. But before that, just what's coming up for you personally in the coming year or so, as far as recording, performance, and so on?
Well, I have my first LP release coming out soon with a label called Ernest Tube.
Great.
They are a gentleman from Well Made Records, who is a very reputable record cutter. They cut a lot of master discs for people, and they took an appreciation to my work, and so I'm putting out my first LP with them soon, and that's actually going to go live for pre-orders soon.
Great.
I'd say by this coming month, and that album's going to be called Appalachian Wilderness.
Right.
And it's really beautiful package, and high quality vinyl and all that. And there'll be some limited, super crazy color splattered things and all that. So I'm very excited to have the vinyl out.
Absolutely.
And I have a cassette release of Snowy Dreamscapes coming out with Jeff Francis label in Akron, Ohio, and Akasa Records out of LA are going to do a cassette release with me. So that'll be fun. I'm currently composing a lot of music right now, but I'm kind of trying to figure out what I want to do next. I have a lot of stuff that I'm writing.
Yeah.
So it just depends. It depends on time. I find that when I do a lot of composed music, it typically takes longer to get out to the finish line than when I just come in and be like, okay, we're cutting a record, because I do a lot of those too. I do a lot of, we're cutting a record today.
Yeah.
ECM style, baby. 2 days. That's it.
That's it. Yeah.
I like that.
And when it works well. So it's a great way to do it.
Yeah. I'm going to be doing some live shows for the Alan R. Pearlman Foundation. Those are coming up. Definitely lots of stuff for Moog Music. I'll be out at Synthplex.
Oh, yep.
Doing a workshop and a concert at Synthplex. I'll be at Super Booth in Berlin. Coming back to the States. I have a few more workshops with universities. I'm going to go out to Mexico City and do, a workshop and a concert with Lab 251. And hopefully that's going to be with Ernesto Romero, who is a friend of mine, colleague, and he is a master synthesist from Argentina.
Right.
And he has an amazing collection of synthesizers. Oh my goodness. That gentleman. But he is a really amazing human being. But that's a big year. I have a pretty big start.
Absolutely.
So.
All right. Well, let's wrap out with that final question, which is Desert Island Discs, and given how you've just demonstrated the diversity both of what you've done yourself and growing up, what you explored, I can imagine this is particularly painful. But are there 5 discs that you couldn't live without if you could only take 5? I'm sure there's 5,000, but 5.
5? Okay. Let's see here. Well, I would say the original motion picture soundtrack for Night of the Living Dead, 1968. That is probably my all-time favorite record ever. And the orchestrations on that are they're just kind of part of my DNA at this point in my life. That music has just been with me and has expanded my point of view of music for many years, over and over. So definitely that one. And that's a collection of composers that are on that. It's basically library music.
Okay.
Some of it's been modified with tape echoes and things like that, but it's just the pieces of music that are on there are just amazing. And some of the ways that they're put together, like there's, it's like jazz orchestra. There's reeds, not just, strings and brass.
Yeah.
So there's some reeds in there too that are creating some interesting textures. And it's very haunting music. It is very, it surrounds you, it's a very engulfing music. I love it. It still thrills me to this day. So that one.
Yeah.
Number 2, I would have to say Black Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath.
Okay. Yeah.
That is a seminal album for me. Oh man, this is tough.
It is.
As it keeps going, it gets tougher. but it changes too.
That's right.
Let's go with today, Ralph Towner solo concert.
Okay.
Do you know who Ralph Towner is? He's
only very broadly, so no. Do feel
multi.
free.
Yeah, he's a multi-instrumentalist, guitarist mainly. But this record is just him on a classical and 12-string guitar,
Right.
and it is an amazing concert, and it is a beautiful collection of music to. Oh, just really, it's just pure oxygen, for the muse and for the heart. So his record is very beautiful. I'd love, Ralph Towner solo concert. Let's see here, what else? Number 3, let's go with Sandy Denny.
Okay.
And her collection of music called "Who Knows Where the Time Goes."
Right.
That's kind of cheating. It's like a
four
LP disc. Yeah, that's how I do it. She's huge to me. She's a huge musical inspiration. She's a Canterbury, England musician, songwriter, vocalist, guitarist, pianist, and she wasn't on the earth very long, but man, she made quite a noise while she was here. I just love her depth and her style, and there's a wilderness of the heart in her music that I love.
Brilliant.
It's not it's very linear, her themes, and I love it. I love her. I miss her, I wish she was still here. So let's see here. Number 4, I would have to say Slayer, Hell Awaits.
There you go. Yep.
And that record is one of those few records that I can put on and immediately feel like my voltage has been attenuated to that frequency.
Yeah.
It's I know that a lot of these listeners won't understand some of these choices, but it's intent over content.
Yeah, that's right.
And music is just simply, it's a portal into that universe, whatever it is.
That's right.
And what you're hearing, 4 people going at it and running those tunes. It's not a lot of studio fixins.
No.
It's just power, sheer power. So it's definitely that record. And I love the lyrics.
Yeah.
I think that they are a great antidote to today's times, even 30 years later. Okay, I would say I better list one electronic music record for the last one. And I guess I'd have to say one of the electronic records I listen to the most would probably be Zanov, Green Ray. Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not.
Oh, man, that is a good one. He's a special one. It's like a pair of 2600s. Imagine that.
Yeah.
VCS3, some tape delays, and I think that's about it. And it's just the way that he crafts that music. It's like, and I love Klaus Schulze. Okay, I love Klaus. But it's kind of like Klaus without the noodling, I love Klaus, but sometimes the keyboard solos, so I would say, that would be one. I didn't list any Alan Holdsworth. Now I'm regretting it. But.
They're an amazing 5, and for the record, our more attentive listeners will realise that you've actually chosen 6, but I think you deserve it given the diversity you had to cover. So I think that's allowed.
Sorry.
That's all right. You picked 2 number 3s, but I thought, no, this is good. So
you asked for it. I couldn't help it.
Exactly. No, look, Lisa, thank you.
That's how much I love many different kinds of music.
That's right. No, it's a great thing. So, no, can't thank you enough for taking the time today. Very excited to hear the new album, and obviously you have a huge year ahead. And as I said before the show, hopefully at some stage we get you down this part of the world, even though most of our listeners are in the US, UK and France, and with a few Australians. It'd be lovely to get you down here one day for some master classes and performances. Who knows? We'll try and make it.
I'd be grateful. Yeah, one of my dreams in this life is to play with Virgil Donati.
Oh, yep.
Are you familiar with him?
Not again, broadly only, yeah.
Yeah, wow. I mean, there's a musician that has, all of the control voltage possibilities in a human,
Yeah.
And yeah, he's very multi-timbral.
Yeah. No, well, yeah, look, fingers crossed, but no, again, thank you, Lisa. It's been absolutely brilliant.
Oh, thank you so much, David. I'm very much enjoyed it. I really appreciate you including me.
And there's another episode. I've got to say, it was a great pleasure to talk to Lisa. One of the things I love about this podcast is just the eclectic choices people make around whether it's their desert island discs or their inspirations or just the way their journey led them to being where they are today. So yeah, thanks again, Lisa. That was absolutely brilliant. So as always, we'll be back again in a fortnight or so, but just a reminder that you can keep in touch via a few means. First, our website is at www.keyboardchronicles.com. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/Keyboard Chronicles or on Twitter at the Keyboard CHR1. If you like good old-fashioned email, then we're always keen to hear from you via editor@keyboardchronicles.com. In the meantime, enjoy your playing and we'll see you soon.